Hello, my name is Beth Ford and I'm really excited to be a part of this year's Youth Climate Summit. I'm here today to talk to you about a group I set up this summer called the Boscombe Beach Busters, but first I thought I'd introduce myself and tell you a little bit about me. I'm 20 years old and I'm in my third year at Cardiff University studying environmental geography, where I get to learn all about our planet and how it works. I study everything from climate change to coral reefs, glaciers to rocks in the atmosphere. I feel so lucky to be studying something I love, and I hope to use the knowledge to educate others and spend the rest of my career protecting our planet. I'm a huge lover of nature and spend a lot of time outside, whether that's surfing down in Cornwall, climbing up on Dartmoor or hiking in the Lake District. I had hoped to be presenting to you guys live or maybe on a beach somewhere, but sadly we're in lockdown in Cardiff, so my bedroom and some rather questionable lighting and camera skills will have to do. I hope you enjoy this presentation and I'll have a live Q&A afterwards if you have anything you'd like to ask. So note down any questions you have now and I can answer them for you at the end. I'm going to take you on a little journey of how the Boscombe Beach Busters started. When the UK went into lockdown earlier this year, I went home from Cardiff to Bournemouth to isolate with my family and to be by the sea. Like the rest of the country, we isolated and only left the home for exercise. I got really into running along the beach and going for early morning swims. I'd usually be the first and only person in the water. The beach was so quiet, clean and immaculate. However, as the restrictions started to lift and people were able to move about again, the impacts became visible. One morning, my mum and I had gone down for a swim on the beach, but as we were walking across the sand, we realised we were walking through rubbish. Here are some images of what we found that morning and what the beach looked like. I was so shocked and angry that the beach had been left in such a state. I knew there were only two ways that rubbish could have ended up on the beach. It had either been dropped by visitors or washed up from the ocean. I've previously studied coastal pollution, so I know how to identify if a rubbish has been dropped or washed up. If you've ever wondered how rubbish on a beach has got there, here's how to tell. Rubbish which is washed up from the ocean will tend to show signs of weathering, where the sea has roughed it up a bit. Waves break it down and the strong ultraviolet light from the sun can melt the plastics. For example, bottle tops are usually a bit melted or labels on bottles are ripped. Whereas litter which has been dropped on the beach will be in a pile with other rubbish quite often, and the labels are pretty intact and it shows a lot less signs of weathering. So I knew the rubbish we found that morning had been dropped by visitors. I was too angry to swim, so we went home, grabbed some bin bags and came back to start cleaning up. As a scientist, I was curious as to how and why that rubbish had got there. I'd previously conducted a research study on the Isle of Wight, looking at rubbish which had washed up on the beaches. I'd sampled the litter, tracked where it had come from and worked out how it got there. It had come from all across the world, from Canada, America, China and Japan, travelling on huge ocean currents before ending up on the island. It was a fascinating study, but the rubbish found on Boscombe Beach posed an entirely different project, as this was human driven and the oceans hadn't yet been involved. I decided to take the rubbish home and sort through it. My mum thought I was a bit mad, but I was curious as to know what was going on. So I shared my findings on Facebook. I showed images of what we'd collected, along with a bit of a rant about plastic pollution and the fact that people shouldn't be dropping litter. This post on Facebook sort of blew up. I received 181 shares, 355 reactions and 136 comments in the first couple of days, all of which I replied to. It was a bit more than I was expecting. So many people reached out to me with a mixture of emotions. Some had kind words of thanks, others were angry at the situation, but so many people offered to help and wanted to get involved. A wonderful guy called James from his company Protocol even offered to sponsor future beach cleans and provide equipment that we might need for our cleaning. I was overwhelmed at this kindness and so excited to meet people who also wanted to make a change. It opened up some really interesting conversations and discussions, so I decided to create a beach cleaning group where we could talk about this and the environment and organise more beach cleans. On the 1st of June 2020, the Boscombe Beach Busters was born. My initial goal was to collect rubbish, bring people together and raise awareness through our actions. So I ordered the kit we would need, including bin bags, gloves, high-vis jackets and litter pickers, ready for our first group beach clean. I decided we would go when the weather was good, as the beaches would be busiest. We congregated by Boscombe Pier, as this was an easy landmark for people to see and often where rubbish is collected. We then walked from the pier all the way along the beach, collecting rubbish as we went. As we walked, people would often stop and ask us what we were doing or want to chat about pollution in the environment. It was an amazing opportunity to reach a wide audience of people and to stop the problem as it was occurring. One of our amazing volunteers, Rhonda, came along to every beach clean. She's a teacher and has an amazing way of handling certain situations. There was one instance where a large group of teenagers were surrounded by empty beer bottles, cans and cigarette butts. She slowly started collecting them around them when the group jumped up and started to help. They went to put the rubbish in her bin bag, but she politely asked them if they wouldn't mind just following her up to the council bin and popping it in there. She politely explained that we were collecting rubbish that had been left on the beaches for scientific purposes, and if they wouldn't mind putting their rubbish in the bin, that would be really great. She had a brilliant chat with them, and it opened up their minds to the impacts that their rubbish was having. We had so many conversations like this with people all throughout the summer. It was really impactful to be able to meet these people and talk to them as the problem was occurring. I think we genuinely managed to change some minds. And so many people came up to us and asked if they could join in. I'm so thankful to all the volunteers that came along and gave up their time to help me with the beach cleans. So many people wanted to get involved. It was overwhelming at their kindness and excitement, and nice to meet some fellow mad people who wanted to sift through rubbish like me. I also met an amazing guy called Connor who helped me put together some of the footage for the beach clean. He did the fantastic drone footage and even a little photo shoot for us with our new t-shirts that we had made. So after the beach clean, I would take the bags of rubbish we'd collected home and spend several hours sat in my garden sorting through them. It was by no means a pleasant job, but it was important because I wanted to see what we had collected, and it was important to me that what we collected didn't just end up in landfill. That seemed completely pointless, as the issue wasn't going to be fixed, it was simply being moved. My sorting process involves emptying out all of the bin liners, separating the rubbish into containers based on material type. I had different buckets for cigarette bins, metal bottle tops, plastic bottle tops, glass, tin, fabrics, recyclables, anything you can think of had its own box. Sometimes I would lay out all of the pieces to see what we'd collected and make some kind of visual art out of it. It was really interesting to see it all laid out in front of us, as it had all been in carrier bags and bin liners. To see it laid out was immense, to see the sheer volumes of rubbish we were collecting. I tried to arrange some of it in artistic ways to illustrate what we'd found. It made for some quite impactful pictures, and it was really interesting to be able to analyse this. After everything was separated out, then I had to figure out what to do with it next. This is when I turned to social media for help. I posted photos of what we had collected and asked for suggestions on Facebook what to do with it. I also set up a website to post our findings and keep track of our stories and what we were doing each week. I was overwhelmed with the creativity and imagination of people and the amazing suggestions that they came up with as to what to do with this waste. Before I talk about what we did with the rubbish, I want to explain the importance of stopping it from entering the oceans in the first place. Earth is known as the blue planet because of the vast, incredible oceans which cover 70% of the Earth's surface. They contain some of the most biodiverse ecosystems on our planet, such as coral reefs and seagrass beds, which are home to a whole host of diverse communities and incredible creatures, including my favourite, which is the dugong, also known as the sea cow. We rely on the oceans for our food, economy, tourism, trade, recreational activities and much more. But much like how we forget what happens to our rubbish when we throw it away, we forget that our actions have consequences on the ocean that we can't see. Plastics and other pollutants have hugely detrimental effects on marine life in the ocean. They're entering our seas through our waterways, being dumped off ships and washed off our beaches. Many marine organisms, such as fish, turtles, whales, and even corals, are eating plastics found floating in the water column, as they're mistaking it for food. This is filling their stomachs with plastic, and they can't eat their natural food source. Rubbish is also polluting their habitats. Can ties are ensnaring turtles, and loose fishing nets are trapping sharks, preventing them from swimming. Plastics are also able to absorb toxic chemicals into their molecular structure. So when they're eaten, they break down and release these toxic chemicals into the bodies of the organisms which have eaten them. Studies have shown that these toxic chemicals are altering the growth rate, reproductive rate, and causing mutations in these species, damaging and declining their numbers. When a big fish eats a little fish, which has eaten plastic, the plastic toxic chemicals are passed from one to the other. This is known as bioaccumulation, and it goes right the way up the food chain, so that these toxic chemicals are passed from one to another right the way up. This ultimately could threaten humans, as we're at the top of the food chain, but so little is known about the long-term impacts of this yet. There's a very long list of detrimental impacts that plastic pollution can have on the environment, and I've just named a few. But trust me when I say we must do all that we can to protect our oceans and prevent them from being filled with plastic, for the health of the ocean, for the world, and for ourselves. I hate the idea of waste. There is no such thing as throwing something away, because there is no away in nature. Everything in our planet is part of a cycle. Whether that's carbon, oxygen or ions, it is all recycled and reused through every ecosystem on the planet, and humans are no different. The waste we create doesn't just vanish when we throw it in the bin. We have become so disconnected to our waste that we forget where it goes, and it doesn't just disappear. Every country has a different waste disposal system, some better than others, but on average, only 10% of what we send to be recycled is recycled. Most of it will end up in landfill or in the ocean. That's why I wanted to reuse and repurpose as much of the waste that we collected as possible. I'm now going to go through some of the creative ways in which we did this. The first person who reached out to me was a lovely guy called Matt Browning, who together with his brother Johnny set up a company called Brothers Make. They turn old HDPE plastics into new products. Plastics come in all different shapes, sizes and colours. They're made from fossil fuels and are broken down and refined into different types. HDPE stands for high density polyethylene. This type of plastic is found in many household products, from milk bottles to bottle tops and shampoo bottles. It can be identified with a small triangle with a number 2 in the centre of it, on the bottom of most plastic items. Matt and Johnny show such inventive ways to reuse what many people would view as waste. I've put together some clips from their YouTube channel to explain how they reuse this material. So here they're weighing out the plastic, which is going to go into the new products they're making. So they're using old bottle tops and old bottles which have been sliced up into about equal sizes. So they've simply cut the plastics into similar sizes and are now melting it in an ordinary toasty press. So HDPE plastic is really good for this type of work because it has a low melting point and low toxicity, so it doesn't give off those toxic chemicals when it's melted. This process is repeated several times and layered up. Once melted, the plastic is stripped off and rolled into a ball where it's reshaped to mix the different colours within each sheet. It's then balled together and put back in the oven. This process is repeated many, many, many times until a large sheet of plastic is formed. The amazing thing about polymers is that because of their structure, they can be melted and reshaped many, many times, making them a really versatile material, which is actually quite easy to recycle when it's in this form. Next, the sheet plastic is removed when it's still hot and placed inside a mould, where it is pressed and formed into one large piece of plastic from all of those single tiny bottle tops and plastic pieces. Next, a template is put on top of the sheet and then cut out using a saw, where it can be shaped, polished, filed, drilled, and made into a new piece. So the pieces for this are slotted together. Can you tell what they're making yet? So out of these recycled plastics, they've made a coffee cup holder. Here you can see they've made a stool. 2.1 kilograms of plastic have gone into making that stool top. Finally, they've also made a knife handle, which was set in the same way. So far, they've made a chopping board, a knife, pens, pen pots, spoons, as well as a cup holder and a stool, just to name a few. I'd really recommend checking out their YouTube channel after this as well, to get some more creative ideas on how to reuse plastic. Next, I'd like to share with you a rather creative way of reimagining waste. A wonderful lady called Ali reached out to me. She set up a small business called Jazzy Eco Ears, where she makes jewellery out of recycled materials found on the beaches, in car boot sales and charity shops. Each piece of jewellery is unique and tells a story. In the fight against fast fashion, this venture was a perfect way of combining creativity with sustainability. Ali came and sat in my garden one afternoon and helped me sort out all of the rubbish. She took what she thought she could make into jewellery and made these wonderful items which now have a whole new story. Here are some images of her work and also her Etsy account where you can buy her jewellery or just see what she's been getting up to. This pair was made from straws collected on one of our beach cleans. You don't have to be an expert to give it a try. I even had a go at making my own piece of jewellery out of sea glass that my little cousin had found washed up on her local beach. There are so many creative artists out there doing similar work and rethinking this waste. A local resident, Daniel, contacted me to see if he could have the metal bottle caps we'd collected. It was his passion to collect them, sort them and redistribute them to local makers. I've seen images of these bottle caps being turned into tabletops and other creative ways. It's amazing to think about the journey that this one bottle cap had been on. From its production in a factory to it being sold in a shop, before being taken down to the beach and sadly left in the sand, before it was recollected by us and distributed to other creators and made into something new, where its journey will carry on and people can keep using it. This is the amazing journey that just one piece of rubbish went on. We need to start thinking in more creative ways that we can reuse these resources available to us. We don't have to keep making more, we just have to make better use of what we already have. Another way in which we reused waste is by rehoming it. Every week we collected lots of beach toys, which had sadly been left behind by children and families, most of which were still in good condition. We found buckets and spades, tennis balls and lots of small plastic toys. After a very deep clean, I redistributed these to local families who didn't have toys, so that they could have a new lease of life. In any other non-COVID year, I would have donated these to the beach office, where multiple families could have used them, but the home that these ones went to, the little boy promised me that they wouldn't be left on the beach and they'd be well looked after. So next time you're at the beach, make sure you keep an eye on your little brothers and sisters to make sure they collect all their toys with them so nothing gets left behind. Each week posed new challenges and we were never sure what we'd find. At the start of every beach clean, I'd always challenge everyone to find the most bizarre piece of rubbish they could find. Although the strangest thing we found all summer was a 2.5 metre long piece of pipe insulation down by the water's edge. I still have no idea how that ended up at the beach, and even more confusing was what I was going to do with it. I didn't know if it could be recycled or how to reuse it. Luckily, one of my ingenious surfer friends suggested cutting the pipe up into strips and putting it on the roof bars of my car. That way when I put my surfboard on top it wouldn't get damaged. I've seen these sold in shops for like £30–40, but the fact I could make my own out of waste was brilliant. We just have to come up with creative ways in which we can use them. One pollutant that really annoyed me was cigarette butts. We were collecting hundreds each week, and I simply couldn't think of a way how to reuse or recycle them. So I decided to tackle the problem head on and prevent them from becoming a pollutant in the first place. So I contacted my local council to ask about putting cigarette butt bins along the promenade. My hopes were that people would put the cigarettes in the bin rather than using the beach as an ashtray. My idea gained a lot of interest in social media, but sadly was not approved by the council due to funding reasons. But I didn't give up. I did some more research to see if there was any way of reusing them. And over in California, a very clever guy called Taylor Lane had created the Siggy board. The Siggy board is a surfboard made of cigarette butts. They're set in resin and shaped. This makes for such an impactful piece of art that can actually be used. They represent taking a problem and finding a way to be part of the solution. I'm going to play you a short video about the Siggy board and explain how it works.
Even as a surfer, I didn't know that 80% of the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean. It's worth more than just surfing. We need the ocean to survive. It's easy to believe that our one little action doesn't really matter. But what happens when that action is multiplied by trillions every single year? Plastic filters, leaching toxic chemicals into our waterways, oceans, and killing fish and wildlife.
It's a cigarette.
One of the most creative pieces that we've seen since we started the contest, the winner this year with the cigarette board, Taylor Lane.
Mr. Lane's winning entry used 10,000 cigarette butts. He agrees it's, quote, visually disgusting, but awesome in how gross it is. It's Morning Edition.
The Siggy board represents taking a problem and finding out how you can be part of the solution, but enjoying that process.
And it just opens up this conversation to talk about surfing and our relationship that we have with the ocean. As surfers, we have the capacity to seriously influence the world around us.
But physical action needs to be taken, you know? Like, you can only talk about it so much.
Hey there, we just did a beach cleanup and picked up over 2,000 cigarette butts in an hour. And they got your names all over them. We're just wondering what you're gonna do, cause yeah, they just keep showing up.
Changes only ever happen from the ground. It never comes from the top down, it comes from the ground up. It's not vegetables that I'm interested in, it's about generations after me.
The reason I stood up so hard is because I know we're just the next in line.
Sometimes you have to be in a suit and tie to be disruptive. You need to get round the table to actually disrupt from the inside out.
We would always go right up to that line never cross it.
At the time, you were just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, really.
We need to shift the story within popular surfing culture of what it means to be a surfer, what's cool in surfing, and we need to get past that like throwaway kind of mentality, that flick of the cigarette butt.
The Siggy boards have become more than just conversation starters, and they do more than just ride waves. The ocean is under threat, and as surfers, it's our responsibility to protect it.
By the end of the summer, the only things we had left to send to landfill were wet wipes, sanitary products, and flexible plastics. I'm focusing on encouraging people not to use these, so hopefully next summer they will be even less to send to landfill. So why bother cleaning beaches and doing all of this? The reason I started this is I can't stand watching the destruction that's going on all around us. I felt totally out of control, and it's upsetting to witness and feel so hopeless. I know that single-handedly I can't save the rainforests of Borneo, or prevent coral reefs from bleaching, or stop the icebergs from melting. But the Beach Busters was a small step that I could take to start making a change and encourage others to do the same. Making a change doesn't have to be a huge thing. It can be small in your own life, but everything adds up. As young people, we hold so much power for the next generation as to the changes we can make. I have several visions for the world I want to live in and the future we could all have. Firstly, I want to live in a world where the beaches are no longer covered in litter, and we don't need to do beach cleans anymore, as much as I enjoy them. This is an achievable goal. It simply requires people to change their mindsets and stop dropping litter. If you can bring rubbish to the beach, then you can take it away with you. Secondly, I want everyone to stop creating waste. Now, admittedly, that is a much bigger goal, which will require a large amount of change. But we need to change how we view rubbish, not as waste, but as a resource. We live in a disposable culture where things are created, used once, and thrown away. This is madness, and we have to recognise that. By making changes in our own lifestyles, we can reduce the amount of waste we create. By shopping local and more sustainable, this can have a huge impact. But ultimately, the problem lies out of our hands and with the corporations who are creating this plastic for us to buy in the first place. And big plastic corporation producers are Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Nestle, and P&G. We need to start demanding that these companies take responsibility for the waste that they're creating. So I want to call upon our world leaders to make this change a reality. I want corporations to step up and take responsibility for the waste they create. I want us all to rethink rubbish and what we can do with it. And I want stricter laws on coastal pollution to prevent further destruction of our marine habitats. Climate change is the biggest threat our generation or any before us have ever faced, and it's up to us to tackle this issue. I'd really recommend getting involved in any kind of activism programs you can. We'll be running our beach cleans next summer if you're around the Bournemouth area and want to come and help out, but beach cleans happen all over the country. Some charities that do large ones, such as the Surfers Against Sewage, are worth keeping an eye out as they tend to be organised all over the UK. I really encourage you to go out and get involved in things like beach cleans, climate strikes, marches, anything you can. You can meet like-minded people who also care about the environment, and you never know what it might lead to. When I first started that beach clean, I never thought that it would lead to me talking on a youth climate summit, setting up a charity, getting my own branded t-shirts, or setting up a website. But these are all things that came from one beach clean. It's really exciting to see where these ideas and conversations can lead to, and you never know who you might meet or the opportunities that might arise. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to the organisers of this year's Youth Climate Summit for putting together such an amazing programme of educational resources for everyone to enjoy. It's so important that we share our knowledge about climate and the environment. I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and I'll be doing a live Q&A now to answer any questions you might have.